welcome to the program. We are very, very excited to have Professor David Sinclair, a world-renowned geneticist, and certainly in my mind and most people's mind, the most prominent longevity scientist on the planet. My co-host is Honourable Professor Greg Hunt, who needs no introduction. Until recently, Greg was the Federal Health Minister of Australia, and again, in my mind, probably the best health minister we've ever had.
That's very generous.
So, welcome. David, it's so exciting to have you on this program, and as I mentioned, I really wanted to do this for a long, long time. I'm a huge fan since I've read your book, Lifespan. In some ways, longevity can be defined as the absence of disease. You've taken it really a step further, and you've defined aging as a disease. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I proposed it, about 15 years ago, because I was frustrated that the world, when I was out there talking, and my colleagues, were not really understanding my point. And my point has been, and still is, that aging is something we need to address. It's not something that we should accept. It's not something just is natural and, God-given. It's something that is causing hundreds of thousands of people to die every day. And through my research and others around the world, we've realized that this thing we call aging has a process. In fact, we think it's a universal process that underlies most diseases. So I decided to start calling aging a disease and write about it, in part to make the point that this is something that doctors and really everybody in their own lives should pay attention to as something that they can change.
And David, in terms of change in this process, what sort of, modifications and current research suggests that should be made to improve the longevity?
For individuals?
For individuals.
We could spend a few hours on that. But in people's daily lives, what we've realized is that a lot of what is professed by scientists and nutritionists and doctors is we've learned by essentially through different means slows down the aging process. We thought, okay, eat vegetables, it's got vitamins, and exercise, it makes your blood flow around your body. That's the old way of thinking. What these practices do at the biological and molecular level is they turn on the body's defenses against aging and disease. And actually the lines between disease and aging, they're not just blurred, they're totally overlapping. Mm-hmm. I look at diabetes, heart disease, Alzheimer's, frailty, as all manifestations of a unified process called aging that we can now change. So in your daily lives, what you want to do is put your body in a state of perceived adversity. I call it the adversity mode.
Okay.
In contrast, abundance mode is what society wants to give us. Comfy chairs, lots of food, lots of sugar, 3-4 meals a day, snacks. This is the worst. That's abundance mode. And when we're in abundance mode, our bodies don't fight aging. The genes that slow aging that we study and others actually turn off. And so what you really want to do, and we can get into the granular part of it in a minute, all of the things that I do and I talk about and study in my lab are designed to turn on this longevity program. I call it the survival circuit in my book. And essentially it's something that evolved to keep us alive when times were tough. But stupidly, I guess you could say, inadvertently, we've built a world that feels comfy because we like comfort, but it's having the opposite effect on our health, which is making us age faster. So the usual things, it's don't eat 3 regular meals a day. I try to skip breakfast like I did today and eat a very late lunch if I can. Focus on plants because that is actually a signal that food is not as abundant as eating a mammoth, a giant steak. Exercise, of course, is in there, right? Running is a sign of adversity. If you're being chased by another tribe or a saber-toothed tiger. Temperature is adversity. super hot temperatures could kill your food and your family. So sauna seems to work well. And there's a longer list, of course.
Well, that's very interesting, David. So on that note, what about cryotherapy and, say, hyperbaric oxygen? Do those treatments have scientific basis?
Well, they do, though not for longevity, which is what some people use them for. So it's still early days, but there's some really good evidence that cryotherapy activates these longevity genes. And hyperbaric oxygen therapy, HBOT, also does. And so there's some evidence. If you look at the literature, HBOT looks promising, certainly for wound healing and perhaps some conditions of dementia. But I think a lot of people who provide these products and services exaggerate what is known. But on the other hand, in general, they're pretty safe. And so it's a risk reward. It's like, do you want to spend your money, spend your time on something that may not do anything, but probably won't hurt you either?
So from a consumer's perspective, or somebody taking care of their own healthcare, there is a reasonable basis to the Nordics with their saunas and their ice plunge, or the onsen with the hot and then the cold, but let's not overstate it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's true. So in the case of sauna, that's probably the best of all the things that you've mentioned. Cryo is a little less studied, but sauna's been around, before the Roman times, so we know a fair bit. And scientifically, it's been shown to reduce the rate of heart disease and heart attacks actually quite dramatically by 30-40% in at least in Finnish men who do this regularly at home. But you're right that if you look on the internet, there's a lot of information that exaggerates the wellness industry and what these things can do. And there's a lot of stuff that isn't proven to do anything that is sold as longevity therapies.
Well, just for the listeners, some might be able to see us, and those that can see us will recognise that these are three men in their 50s, all who are incredibly youthful looking. And so clearly something's being done right. But I met David Sinclair as Health Minister, and David, you were the trigger from our meeting for the National Preventive Health Strategy. So as we go along, one of the things will be what individuals can do, but there's also what nations and governments should be doing to encourage health.
Well, that's great. I really encourage entire nations to pay attention to this, because part of the problem with today's world is there's not a lot of education about the small things you can do in your daily life to really impact the health of yourself, your parents, and even your children. And in the case of children, let's just pause on that one. The world we give our children today, even worse than when I was a kid, 40 years ago. My mother used to say, don't eat snacks because you'll spoil your dinner. But I don't see that happen as much. People are convinced that, at least marketers are telling them, your children should never be hungry. It's almost a crime to make your child hungry. But that's normal, natural, and healthy for a child to be hungry. And in fact, the world that we give them now, which is a lot less sports in general, particularly in the United States, and a lot more games and sedentary behavior, they're getting more obese around the world. And this is accelerating their aging process. It's no surprise that young girls are getting fertile earlier. Why? It's not just that they're developing earlier, they're literally getting older faster, which will really cause problems later down the line, because you only get one lifespan. You can stretch it out. But if you use up the first couple of decades very quickly, you're also going to get older faster when you're our age.
David, I wanted to touch on, you've mentioned intermittent fasting, in a way you do this sort of modified intermittent fasting, and obviously there have been quite a few studies looking at caloric restriction, both in animal models and perhaps some in mammal models as well. My question, I guess, is with intermittent fasting, is it important at what time you eat? Because I saw this study yesterday about coffee. So that was in the European Journal of Heart, which said that to improve your sort of longevity and reduce your heart risk, it's important what time you actually have the coffee. So it's important to have the coffee in the morning. So in terms of intermittent fasting, is there any particular time where we should be having our last meal?
Well, yes, there are different chronotypes, right? So you'll know if you are hungry in the morning. Some people love to eat breakfast. I, on the other hand, I'm very happy skipping breakfast. So I prefer to do the late lunch and eat within a time window of about 6 hours at night, late afternoon to night, if I can. Now, I'm not perfect, nobody is, and that's fine, but that's what I aim for every day. But some people, they really need breakfast, and if they do that, then my advice would be to have a very late lunch or a very early dinner and not eat so late.
I wanted to change gears a little bit now, as we sort of touched on a little bit prior to our discussion, is I think there's a lot of interest in longevity and supplements and wellness treatments, but I think people forget, in my opinion, that you can do all the right things. You can take the supplements, do longevity treatments, do intermittent fasting, change your lifestyle, but you can still get prostate cancer, you can still get bowel cancer, you can still get ovarian cancer, pancreatic cancer. I saw a patient recently who I diagnosed with bowel cancer, and he said to me, "But doctor, I can't have bowel cancer, I'm a vegetarian." So I think, and both myself and Greg feel very strongly about preventative medicine and screening in general. What are your thoughts about health screening as part of the longevity journey?
I think it's essential. I'm glad you brought it up because my partner, Serena Poon, she's my partner in life and in business. Just like you, we take care of certain individuals who need advice. And, most people don't know how to navigate their way through this complex world of supplements and screening and medicines. And so we work with doctors, and part of that program includes screening. It's really important. I would say it's far more important to get, let's say, a whole body MRI than it is to have a cup of coffee every morning. And it's about the same price per year. And a whole body MRI, some physicians, doesn't sound like you, but some physicians have said these whole body MRIs are problematic because you might find something and then you don't know what to do. I have the opposite view. I'm a data-driven guy, so I would say get them early and get them often. And by often, I mean every year. But you should have a baseline, right? And because what you want to see is not necessarily year 1 or year 0, but what's different every year. And it's the change that's important. And that way you can pick up cancer or other changes very early. It's actually getting to the point where you can look at the age and determine the age of most tissues in the body. So the scans that I have, they say, all right, your pituitary is starting to get a bit old and your thyroid's got an issue, so let's work on that. Of course, your spine needs some work, so now I'm doing some exercises. But yeah, that screening and the DNA screening for cancer is excellent. And it's just there are going to be more and more tests that allow us not just to treat disease, but hopefully to prevent and detect it early when you can actually cure it rather than waiting till it's incurable.
Yeah, I'm extremely happy that you sort of feel the same way, because we've been sort of doing this and talking about this now for quite a long time.
So if you think of it, at the national level in Australia, we have breast, bowel, cervical, and now targeted lung cancer screening. But both Davids have health screening programs where you have highly developed individualised screening. And I did that with David Bardolph and discovered that I have the MUTYH genetic defect, which is not catastrophic. It means that our family line is more predisposed to bowel cancer, so I get more frequently tested as a result. But most importantly, my kids will know to be more frequently tested. And so you have national programs, but this individualised health screening, in which you're both sort of respective national leaders, is an emerging area of healthcare, but it's not deeply embedded. It tends to be a little bit concentrated at the probably people our age, but also people of a higher socioeconomic. So it's really important to be able to broaden the number of people around the world who are engaged in that health screening.
David, on that note, someone who's want to improve their longevity, what sort of regular biomarkers would you be recommending that people should monitor?
Oh, gee. Well, Serena and I, we have a long list of markers that we look at. But the fundamental ones are, and you can talk to your physician about this. Do you want me to list them?
Yes.
Maybe just a couple, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in general, of course, you want to do just standard blood work, which is looking at your basic cholesterol. You can go very deep in all of these, right? You can look at the size of the particles and the abundance, but you want standard, fairly comprehensive cholesterol testing, hormones, inflammation, kidney function, liver function. Those would be the main things. I like to also do at least once a year looking at heavy metals, toxins, other things that can build up. Mm-hmm. Often you don't know that you've got cadmium or mercury or arsenic in your body. But those are the main things. There's of course you can go very deep and very wide on all of these. One way to find out what you can get done that could be practical is you can go to a company, and in full disclosure, I'm an advisor to them, but this is all free. You can go to their website and look at what biomarkers they look at. So the company is in the US. It's called Inside Tracker, and you'll see what panels that they do. There are others as well that do these, and they're pretty comprehensive. And they actually, interestingly, we co-developed with them an algorithm that takes the list of, I think it's the top 20 of those biomarkers, and scientifically uses them to calculate or at least estimate your biological age. And so I've been estimating my biological age for the last 15 years based on those biomarkers.
On that note, with the biological age, David, there's a number of DNA methylation tests for biological age. I believe you have one as well.
Yeah.
So we've been using a number, including Grim age as well. So how reliable are those tests? Obviously, yours are probably the best.
Yeah. Well, ours is easier because it's a cheek swab rather than a blood test. And a paper just came out from the scientists there that showed you could not just tell your potential age, but also what illnesses you might be developing or prone to. So that's the frontier of science, right? That cells in your body, even from your cheek, can predict diseases, like a canary in the coal mine, your cheek in your body. But yeah, in terms of the predictability, it's still early days. It's not at the point where it's routine medicine and you get a score and it's like, oh my goodness, you should go on that medicine. I would use them as a rough guide. They're somewhere in between fun and medicine. They're a guide. And so for a practitioner like yourself or for me, we can use it and say, all right, you're doing well or you need to do better in this area, and let's monitor you over time. And one test is not going to tell you as much as doing them, say, every 6 months to see how you're doing. And it's your rate of aging that is more important than your actual number.
So I have to ask the personal question, if you don't mind. Your own biological age, has it changed since you have begun to really focus on personal longevity practice, and where was it and where is it?
Yeah, well, I used to be older than my birthdays when I started. Mm-hmm. I wasn't a very healthy guy. I liked pizza, I liked eating, and I was always struggling with my weight. Didn't do a lot of exercise. Running a lab at Harvard doesn't leave a lot of time for much else.
Sure, of course.
When you're trying to get tenure. So in my 30s and early 40s, I was older. But then I started to get serious, changed my diet, changed my exercise, and I started skipping meals. And so, yeah, the answer is I've steadily seen a reduction in my biological age over these years. And a big change actually happened when I met Serena, who I just mentioned. And so she's been in the field of longevity and wellness for 20 years, kind of underground originally, one of the first, if not the first, longevity advisors in LA. You can imagine the clientele that she has met and looks after. But she came into my life and she said, David, I noticed that every dinner you seem to have cheese and red wine. And I said, that's Mediterranean diet, right? And she said, no, actually, no, we can do better. And so I said, all right, you look amazing. I found out how old she was. I thought she was at least 10 years younger than she looked. I said, whatever you do, I'll do it. And of course, I was falling in love madly, so whatever she said I would do. But I've stuck with it. And the reason is that within 2 months, my inflammation markers went way down. I didn't mention blood glucose, but that's a key marker that you need to watch because it'll go up with age if you're not careful. It's also predictive of aging as well. And so my blood sugar went down, inflammation went down. I just got younger.
So was it the cheese or the wine that you gave up, or both?
Or the falling in love. It could have been all three.
I'm sure about the biology of that, but anyway.
Yeah, I can't say for sure because I didn't do it scientifically. Usually I like to change one thing at a time so I can tell what's happening. But a lot was going on at that moment. And I gave up dairy mostly and also alcohol. So yeah, it was a big change, but it had a dramatic effect. And even how I looked, I had wrinkles go away. You can tell from photos from 10 years ago. So yeah, I've stuck mostly with it. She's a strict vegan. I'm a struggling vegan, which means on occasions I'll have, my yogurt and my meat. I tend not to eat a lot of red meat because the statistics on that are pretty clear. That unless you want to be a bodybuilder and that's your only goal, longevity is not going to be helped by red meat.
That's very, very interesting. David, I wanted to change gears somewhat. What's become topical in the last probably 5 years is microbiome. How does microbiome, and what's the research on microbiome and longevity?
Well, that's another area where it's a little overstated. Most of what we know is from fecal transplants in animals. Some really interesting studies in fish and in mice. If you transplant them from young to old and old to young, you can change the age and the health of the animal in the way you think you would predict. The young fecal transplant rejuvenates the old and vice versa. So there's some evidence that it might happen in humans, but really no strong evidence that it actually works. But what is known is that the type of species that you have in your gut depend on what you eat and also can greatly affect your physical and mental health. And so optimizing your microbiome by measuring it and taking probiotics and prebiotics is, I think, a very important part of a longevity program.
Yeah, that's really very, very, very interesting.
We've taken it pretty seriously as a country. We have supported a national centre for the study of the microbiome at St George Hospital, St George Institute in Sydney. And they're doing some pretty world-leading research, at least as a non-clinician looking on, and again making those suggestions that are achievable but not absolutely prescriptive for people to adjust diet or adjust intake of appropriate supplements or other things.
Yeah, that's great because we need more research in this area. Some of the probiotics that you find on the market, they're just standard bacteria that you could get from yogurt. Typically, and it's not clear if they really have a health benefit or even survive for long in your gut. But there are some really good studies that there are particular species that are found in athletes and in very healthy people, and you lose them over time as you get older. And you can, at least in theory, supplement with those particular species. And typically what they are these are highly anaerobic bacteria that are not easy to produce outside the gut, but people do. But they're costly, of course, for that reason. But what they do is they in the gut they make molecules that are healthy. One particular class that you probably know of is they're called short-chain fatty acids, butyrate, acetate. And these are molecules that are used by the body for a lot of healthy things, including the state of fasting. So these molecules don't just get produced when you're fasted, they signal that the body is fasted. So I think what's happening is when you take these bacteria or you swallow these molecules which taste terrible, but these small short-chain fatty acids, they signal to the body that you're fasted. And again, like this adversity mode I was telling you about, turn on the body's defenses.
Yeah. As you well know, we do fecal transplants in humans. The current indication is really for resistant Clostridium difficile bacteria, but there's also a lot of research currently has been done. There's a big trial going on with inflammatory bowel disease and fecal transplants. So perhaps this is the space to watch, maybe fecal transplants for weight loss or longevity.
Yeah, well, that is an area that's really interesting, the weight loss part. It's true, actually. You can give someone who rarely gets fat, we all know people like that. Serena's like that. She doesn't put on a lot of weight. And I suspect that part of it's her microbiome. And so there are experiments that have been done where you can give somebody a new microbiome and they don't gain as much weight. I think it's a super exciting area. And even in areas like autism and Parkinson's, there's emerging area that mental health or diseases of the mind can be helped by the microbiome. The gut-brain axis is a very ripe area for research.
To touch on that, David, in your book, you've been a fairly strong supporter of certain supplements and medications such as metformin, NMN, resveratrol, and I must say that I followed your advice and I take that myself as well. Is there still sort of strong evidence or stronger evidence perhaps to suggest that this is something that people should be considering?
Well, every year the evidence gets stronger. I've always tried to just talk about the science and not recommend or promote anything. I certainly don't make any money off this stuff. I'm just talking science. But I have been shocked actually how these industries have taken off. NMN, which is something we study in my lab, an NAD boosting molecule is apparently a $2.5 billion global industry now. But I just wanted to make that clear. I don't really promote them, but I do talk about them. And the evidence is getting stronger for all three of those that you mentioned, resveratrol, NMN, and metformin. And more human trials are being done. And really the only true evidence that you can trust that I like to say is a fact is when a double-blind placebo-controlled study in humans is done. The rest is animal research and might work. And let's focus on NMN, for example. My goal is to make maybe not NMN itself, but something like NMN a drug. So you might say, well, why would you make it a drug if you can buy it at the pharmacy or the chemist? Well, the reason is that there have been studies, no surprise, that about half of the NMN products don't have any NMN in it or don't have the right amount. And we know from my lab studies in mice that NMN can come from other countries contaminated with things like endotoxin. So the supplement industry is very poorly regulated, and you don't get extra points if you test your product in humans. Mm-hmm. And so it's a race to the bottom in that industry because of the regulation. And I mean, maybe Greg, you have ways that you could fix that, but we definitely need something to change.
Well, there's two things. One is from a regulatory perspective. The US has the FDA, Australia has the TGA or Therapeutic Goods Administration. But I've got a question here. The science of personalised or precision health. So to take the general supplements or aids that David Bardov and David Sinclair are talking about, but epigenetics and the ability to identify the fact that certain doses, certain supplements, certain types will be vastly preferable for, what Greg has will be different to what David Bardov has to David Sinclair. How evolved is that science and how prospective is the epigenetics for that targeted choice of health support for individuals?
Oh, it's primitive. The philosophy is, my philosophy is that everybody's different. You need to measure before you optimize. And there's no one prescription for everybody. We are all different. I mean, we might be white men of a certain age, but we differ in a lot of other things, our genetics, for instance. And so my prescription would be, philosophy is, learn as much about the individual, genetics. You can measure the epigenetics to some extent, not so much, but it'll get better. And you can certainly ask your patients and your clients their daily food intake, their lifestyle, where do they get their water, what's their environment like, their air. And with looking at all of that, then you can make small adjustments to their medicines, as you would do as a doctor and me as an advisor, to maybe their lifestyle and their supplements. But then you have to measure things. That's where it really comes in, because this is the main point. Everybody's different. You guys will respond differently to something I take and vice versa. So when people say, Sinclair, what do you take? And I say, well, it's on page 304 of my book. The preamble to that page is everybody's different. And if you try what I do, make sure you measure it, talk to your doctor, get the tests, and make sure it works for you. You might need more or less. You might be allergic to something. Your liver is different, right? You might damage your liver with something. And the products that people take are probably going to be different in different countries, and they may be contaminated. They may not have the product in them. So you always have to do these right now on an individual basis. We don't have enough to say, here's the test, and take all of these things, you'll be right, and you don't need to come back until later. It's a constant scientific process that needs to be done, which is part of the reasons it's currently expensive, right? If you deal with millions of people in the economy right now, these scans and the kind of things that we do in this concierge medicine world is for not everybody, right? Because it currently is quite expensive. But the hope is with AI and with all these other technologies coming, and the monitors that you can put on your wrist or on your stick on your chest, these are coming. It'll be democratized, and everybody in a nation will be able to afford this kind of monitoring to be able to help.
There you go. I mean, that is absolutely right. We see it with so many different treatments. I like the term democratizing access to advanced medicines and screening. You know, we have a pharmaceutical benefit scheme in Australia which effectively takes the high-cost medicines and distributes them to all of the patients to whom it's prescribed. But that idea of what's largely confined to people in a better economic circumstance being progressively available to everybody, I think is a really exciting trend.
So, David, in 2025, what does David Sinclair take apart from metformin, Anaman, and resveratrol? Is there anything else?
Well, of course, there's other stuff.
Brian Johnson, for instance, uses a lot of other stuff.
Well, I don't share everything I do. Some of it I'm doing that I'm not sure if it's working, and I need to make sure.
Yeah.
And some of it's really on the cutting edge. So, but generally I share what I do, the basics, and what my father does. He's still 85 and without any disease or ailment and going strong. He's really the role model.
Yes.
He's the guy.
Yeah.
And so what else so Serena and I would say we play a symphony of supplements, and we can tailor. We know our body so well. It's not the same every week. It's not the same even every day. We know what we need. We feel what we need. The tests change what we take. So there's not an easy answer there. But there are some things that I've added over the years that are in addition to those. For example, there's one called Spermidine, which is found throughout the plant world as well as in animals and even in semen, which is how it got its name. Mm-hmm. But Spermidine does a number of things that's been shown now again in human trials, so I'm okay talking about it. It seems to promote autophagy, which is what happens when, you know this, but what happens when you fast. Think of it as protein recycling, which is very healthy. It also seems to stabilize the epigenome. So, Greg, you mentioned the epigenome, and this is something that I think is central to aging, and slowing down epigenetic noise or drift, which is really a major cause. Spermidine works against that, to slow that down as well. So Spermidine. And another one I'll mention is alpha-lipoic acid. Alpha-lipoic acid is also known as ALA. Coincidentally, I did my PhD on it in Sydney, Australia, UNSW.
Huh.
And but I wasn't into ALA as a supplement. I was just studying it for biology in yeast cells. And then I met Denham Harmon, who is a legend in the aging field. He came up with the free radical theory of aging. And while that hasn't panned out to be the ultimate reason why we age, it was pretty bold. And so when I met him, he was 92, still working in the lab. And I was receiving an award called the Denham Harmon Award. So big legend, big day for me. And I had a chance to talk to him, and I I didn't have much time because he was busy, and I said, you're 92, what's your secret? And he said, it's ALA. And I thought, okay, well, if it's good enough for denim, I'll start taking it. I've been taking it for about 15 years now, and the science on that has just become stronger and stronger, that it's an important ingredient to maintain the health of cells, in particular mitochondrial health. And if listeners don't know much about mitochondria, these are the organelles, little packages within the cell that once were free-living bacteria but are in our bodies now, in every cell, pretty much every cell, that provide energy and metabolize amino acids and do a lot of really good stuff. But we lose their activity as we get older.
Amazing. David, what's the future of longevity science? Where do you see this is going?
Well, it's going so fast now, my head spins. I'm trying to keep up with the literature by reading, probably skimming 20, 30 papers a day, but still, I need AI to keep up with it. Compared to when I started 30 years ago, it was the backwater of biology, and people didn't even believe you could study it. How could yeast cells tell you anything about aging? Now it's clearly one of the hottest areas of medicine, with billions of dollars being invested in certain companies, co-owned by the likes of Jeff Bezos and Sam Altman. So it's going super fast, and with AI, it's only accelerating. And experiments that once took my lab, let's say 10 years ago, would have taken us a few years, we can do in a couple of days now for much less money. And we're reading epigenomes in single cells now by the millions, and it's really quite an amazing time to be alive. So I think the next 5 years, it's hard to know where we'll be, but I am seeing incredible progress even just in my own lab. My students are right now using robotics. My lab actually just posted on Instagram a picture of the robots yesterday screening tens of thousands of candidate molecules that we think will literally reverse aging. We are chasing the goal of one day having a pill that can reverse aging. So you take that pill for a few months every decade and you go back, you get reset. And by the way, that is not crazy talk. We do this in the lab using gene therapy. That gene therapy has reversed the aging of mice. We've cured blindness in mice. Others have extended their lifespan by an additional 100-something%. We've shown that this blindness reversal, curing of blindness, works in monkeys. And the company that was spun out of my lab, who I should give good credit to, Life Biosciences, is headed into human trials early next year. And so if it works, then it'll be a game changer, right? Because we'll, for the first time, not just be talking about slowing aging with a supplement, but literally reversing the aging process to treat damaged and diseased conditions.
So I have it's a scientific but almost a philosophical question as well. But the brief background, if you think of sort of the grand trajectory in health and medicine around the world, genomics and the capacity to diagnose and treat, stem cells, exactly what you were talking about, again, capacity to diagnose, but especially to treat, and the pathway of regenerative medicine, with the grand prize being dementia, either mitigation or even halting at some stage. Precision health with AI, and then the remote diagnostics, whether it's the Apple Watch or the EV Ring or the Movano or the continuous diagnostic or continuous glucose monitor. All of that means that people have the capacity to live longer. But the philosophical question is health span versus lifespan. What is it that we should be looking for?
Health span, period. Often when I talk about this or someone reads my book, the first thought is, I know what 95 looks like and I don't want to go there. I want to die before that. Or even 85. Some people don't even want to reach 85. If you look at my father, though, 85, he's having the best time of his life. He has no aches or pains and is traveling the world and goes out every night. And that's what I want for every 85-year-old. So the reason I mention my father is, as long as people are healthy and happy, no one wants to die. I've never met anybody who says, just because tomorrow I'm turning 85, I want to die tomorrow, if they're happy and healthy. So the goal with all of my research, and I think the goal of society should be prevent disease, cure disease, keep people healthy, mentally, physically. Not just physically. Mentally has to be included, otherwise it's not worth it. But if you do that, there is an interesting side effect. You live longer, but it's not the primary goal. It can't be.
Good. I mean, there's a policy challenge which I considered early on in my time as minister. People said, "Oh, are you worried about people living longer?" I said, "No. Yes, it comes always comes with side effects. But what is my job as a minister, our job as a government, is to enable people to have the best quality of life for as long as possible." So it's interesting to hear the cutting edge scientists' perspective on that, which is not dissimilar to the policy perspective.
Yeah. Well, we've done some calculations. By we, I mean a couple of economists in London, along with me as the biologist. And we've published that and done the calculation with some pretty complex math that the economic benefits to the United States, which is where we focused on, of increasing health span just by 1 year adds $38 trillion of value to their economy over the coming 3 decades after that.
And is that essentially because of the two elements? On the one hand, people maintain their productivity for longer. On the other hand, they may draw less from the public health system.
Yes, it's all of that. And then they travel, they spend, and they take care of the grandkids. There's so many benefits. And actually there was a feed-forward mechanism that made the numbers go up even more, which is that the more people experience longer life in a healthy way, the more they want to spend money on achieving that. And so there's going to be a whole economy of people trying to live longer in a healthy way as well that drives up the economy.
Dave, thank you so much. I've fulfilled my dream of interviewing you, and thank you so much for sharing your incredible insights. Really appreciate your time.
Oh, you're welcome. And David, thanks for all you do. And Greg, it's great to see you again.
And yourself. And again, as a nation, I just have to say that we're very fortunate that we have brilliant clinicians such as Professor David Sinclair, who've become world-leading researchers, and that's being translated. So translational science, which is ultimately about saving lives and improving lives and extending lives, but extending with that fundamental goal of health span. And I think that's what I take out of today. It's possible at a national level. It's within each of our grasps at an individual level to improve our health span. And so thank you for the lessons.
You're welcome. And keep doing what you guys are doing. You're great. I really appreciate what you've been doing.
Thank you so much, David.